Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Get ready for heart-touching stories. Don't forget to subscribe and let's begin.
The day we buried our father, my brother Marcus couldn't even wait until the reception was over. I remember standing by the kitchen sink at our childhood home, washing casserole dishes that kind neighbors had brought over when I heard him on the back porch. He was on the phone with someone, his wife I assumed, and his voice carried through the old screen door the way voices always did in that drafty house. "She got the house," he said, laughing softly. "The old house, can you believe that? I get the company and she gets that money pit on Caldwell Road." I turned off the faucet. The dish in my hand dripped quietly onto the linoleum. "Dad always had a soft spot for her," Marcus continued. "Sentimental, I guess, but sentiment doesn't pay dividends, does it?" I set the dish down carefully, the way you set something down when your hands have started to shake and you don't trust yourself not to drop it. Then I walked upstairs to the room I'd grown up in and sat on the edge of the bed until the shaking stopped. My name is Claire Whitmore, and until that September afternoon I had never once considered that my father might have loved me less. We weren't a demonstrably emotional family. Our father, Robert Whitmore, was a man of quiet gestures. He remembered how you took your coffee. He showed up when your car broke down. He kept every birthday card you ever gave him in a shoebox in his closet. I found that out only after he died, going through his things. 40-some cards from me alone, rubber banded together with a piece of masking tape that had my name written on it in his handwriting. Marcus was different. Marcus was the golden child in the way that oldest sons sometimes are, not because our father played favorites, but because Marcus had learned to occupy space in a way that got him noticed. He'd gone into the business straight out of college, worked alongside our father for 15 years, learned every corner of Whitmore building supply. It made sense that he would inherit it. I'd always known that, and I'd never resented it. What I hadn't known was how little Marcus thought of me until I heard him laughing on that porch. The reading of the will took place 11 days after the funeral, in the downtown office of a man named Gerald Foss, who had been our father's attorney for over 30 years. Marcus arrived in a new suit. His wife Deborah came with him, though she hadn't been invited and Gerald didn't comment on it. I came alone. The basics were as expected. Marcus received full ownership of Whitmore Building Supply, including the warehouse property, the fleet vehicles, the accounts, and the inventory. It was valued, Gerald mentioned with professional neutrality, at approximately $4.2 million. I received the house on Caldwell Road. Marcus's expression when Gerald read that part was something between satisfied and pitying, the look of someone who has won a bet they weren't sure they'd placed. Deborah examined her manicure. I watched them both from across the conference table and kept my face very still. The house on Caldwell Road had been built in 1923. Our father had grown up in it. His father had grown up in it. The foundation had issues, the plumbing was 50 years old, and the roof had been patched rather than replaced so many times that the patches had patches. The last time I'd visited 2 summers ago, helping Dad clear out the garage, a section of the back porch had given way under my foot and I'd twisted my ankle on the way down. "Sentimental," Marcus had said. Gerald cleared his throat. "There's one additional item." He removed a sealed envelope from the folder in front of him and set it on the table between us. "Your father left this. He asked that it be opened at the conclusion of the reading." Marcus reached for it. Gerald's hand moved an inch toward it, not quite stopping him but close enough that Marcus paused. "He specified," Gerald said quietly, "that Claire should open it. I don't know what I expected. A letter maybe. Some sentimental explanation about family legacy and the importance of roots. Something I could fold up and carry home and read again when I missed him." What I found instead was a single index card, and on it, in my father's cramped handwriting, 7 words: "Check the floor in my old bedroom." I drove to Caldwell Road that evening alone. Marcus had asked to come, his tone shifting somewhere between the attorney's office and the parking garage into something more careful, more watchful, and I'd told him I needed time to process things privately. He hadn't pushed. That itself told me something. The house smelled like it always had, cedar and old paper and something faintly floral from the dried hydrangeas my grandmother had hung in the kitchen decades ago and no one had ever had the heart to throw out. I stood in the front hallway for a long moment with my hand on the door frame, just breathing, then I went upstairs. My father's childhood bedroom was the small one at the end of the hall, not the master bedroom he'd slept in as an adult, but the one he'd grown up in, the one with the slanted ceiling and the window seat that looked out over the back garden. It had been a guest room for as long as I could remember, then a storage room, and now just an empty room with bare walls and a radiator that ticked in cold weather. The floor was oak hardwood throughout the house, original to the construction, uneven in places where the boards had swollen and contracted over a century of seasons. I stood in the middle of the room and looked at it and wondered where to start. It took me 20 minutes to find it, and only because I remembered something my father had told me once when I was a child, that when he was a boy he'd had a hiding spot that nobody knew about. He'd never told me what was in it. I'd always assumed it was boyhood treasures, baseball cards maybe, or folded notes. The board was near the window seat, slightly shorter than the ones around it, with no nails at one end. It lifted out cleanly like it had been designed to. Inside the hollow beneath it was a metal lockbox, green, military style, the kind sold at army surplus stores. There was no lock on it. Inside the lockbox was a manila envelope. Inside the envelope were documents. I sat on the floor of that old room for 2 hours reading. The first document was a deed. Not to the house on Caldwell Road, I already knew about that, but to 11 acres of land on the eastern edge of town that I had never heard of. The deed was in my father's name, dated 18 years ago with a handwritten note attached, "For Claire when the time is right." The second document was a letter from a development company dated 4 years ago. They were interested in purchasing the land for a mixed-use residential and commercial project. The figure they'd offered as a starting point, the letter emphasized, before negotiation was $6 million. My father had declined. There was a polite response in his handwriting, a carbon copy, saying only that he wasn't prepared to sell at this time. The third document was a more recent appraisal, ordered 14 months ago. The land, now adjacent to a rapidly expanding part of the city, had been valued at $9.3 million. The fourth document was a letter to me. "Dear Claire, if you're reading this, then Gerald has done his job and Marcus has done exactly what I expected him to do, which is assume he understands the full picture when he has only seen the frame. The house is yours. It has always felt like yours. You're the one who sat in the window seat reading, who helped me restore the garden, who asked about my grandmother's name and actually remembered the answer. Marcus never once asked. I don't say this to be unkind to your brother. I say it because a place should belong to the person who loves it, but I am not a sentimental man at the expense of fairness. The land on Caldwell Road's east parcel has been in this family for 3 generations. I bought out your uncle's share 18 years ago with the specific intention of leaving it to you. I never told you because I didn't want you making decisions based on an inheritance that hadn't materialized yet. I wanted you to build your life on your own foundations first, and you have. The development company will call again. They always do. The decision about what to do with the land is entirely yours. Sell it, develop it yourself, hold it, you'll know what's right. You always have. One more thing. There is a second envelope at the bottom of the box. Open it last. I love you, Claire Bear. I have loved you every day of your life in every way I knew how. I hope the shoebox told you some of that." Dad, I had forgotten about the shoebox until that moment, the one I'd found in his closet with all my birthday cards, my name on the masking tape. I sat there on the floor with the letter in my hands and I wept in the ugly, graceless way that grief sometimes demands, the kind you can only do when you're alone in an old house at night. When I was ready, I reached back into the box and found the second envelope. Inside it was a note, much shorter this time, and a document I needed to read 3 times before I understood what it was. The note said, "I had Gerald update this 6 months ago. He'll know what to do." The document was a rider attached to the original will, a legal addendum specifying that if any heir contested the terms of the will, made a legal claim against the estate, or engaged in any action deemed to be in bad faith against another beneficiary, their inheritance would be immediately reduced by 50%, with the forfeited portion transferring to the non-contesting heir. My father, who had watched Marcus for 60 years, had known exactly who he was. I called Gerald Foss the next morning. He answered on the second ring, which told me he'd been expecting my call. "You found it," he said. "I found it. Your father was a thorough man. You know about the land." "I've known about the land for 18 years, Gerald said. "I helped him structure the ownership specifically to keep it separate from the business assets. He was very clear that it was yours and only yours, and that he didn't want it mentioned in any document Marcus might have access to before the reading." I thought about Marcus on the back porch laughing. He knew, I said, that Marcus would react that way. "Your father was a student of character," Gerald said carefully. "He loved your brother. He also knew your brother." I looked out my kitchen window at the ordinary Tuesday morning happening outside, a neighbor walking a dog, 2 kids waiting for a school bus, a world proceeding as if everything were exactly the same as it had been a month ago. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Gerald said, "I'd recommend we reach out to that development company. The market in that corridor has continued to appreciate. I suspect their current offer would be considerably higher than their last one." "Marcus," there was a brief pause. "Marcus received exactly what your father intended him to receive. The business your father spent 15 years teaching him to run, a $4 million inheritance, a future." Another pause. "What he did not receive was everything, which is perhaps what he expected. I have not told Marcus about the land, not because I'm cruel, not because I want him to spend years in ignorance while I quietly become wealthier than I'd ever imagined. I'll tell him when the time is right, when the paperwork is complete and the thing is done and there's nothing left to contest or undermine or reframe. I've learned in the months since my father died that some information is safest kept close until it's ready to be known. That was a lesson from my father, too. The development company did call again. Gerald was right about that. We're in negotiations now. The opening number was 11.2 million. My father would have smiled at that, I think, in his quiet way. The house on Caldwell Road, meanwhile, is being renovated. The foundation is being repaired properly. The roof is being replaced entirely, not patched. A contractor I trust found that the bones of the place are extraordinary old-growth oak framing, craftsmanship that hasn't existed since before my grandfather was born, and that with proper care the house could stand for another 100 years. I've moved into it. I sleep in the old master bedroom where my father slept, And in the mornings I drink my coffee in the kitchen under the dried hydrangeas. And on weekends I work in the garden that my father and I restored together 2 summers ago, the summer before we knew he was sick. The window seat in the small bedroom at the end of the hall has a new cushion now. Blue linen, which was my grandmother's favorite color apparently. I found that out from an old letter in a drawer. On quiet evenings, I sit there and read, just as my father always said I used to do when I was small. He remembered everything. That, in the end, was how he loved.